All right, welcome back, class. Let's go ahead and get started with our new text set. This week we're going to be focusing on an author study. The author is Andrea Davis Pinkney, and we're going to dive into 4 of her books and kind of get to, experience and analyze and check out her writing style. And the neat thing about her books is she often um, co-works with her husband, and her husband is the illustrator of most of the books that we're going to read this week. So that's pretty exciting. The first story we're going to read is Duke Ellington. Here's the cover of that book. Okay. Um, Obviously by Andrea Davis Pinkney, and her husband's name is Brian Pinkney. All right, and so let's go ahead and dive right in. First, before we start, I want you to think about what music means to you. Think about music. What does it mean to you? This book is a biography of Duke Ellington, who was a legendary piano player. His jazz music has influenced musicians for decades. The book is written by, obviously, Andrea Pinkney, and illustrated by her husband. Together, they have written and illustrated many books and received many awards. I want you to listen as I read and learn what made Duke Ellington a legend at this time, or in his time. All right. Duke Ellington, the Piano Prince and his Orchestra. You ever hear of Jazz Playing Man? The man with the cats who would swing with his band? He was born in 1899 in Washington, D.C., born Edward Kennedy Ellington. But wherever young Edward went, he said, "Hey, call me Duke." Duke's name fit him rightly. He was a smooth-talking, slick-stepping, piano-playing kid. But his piano playing wasn't always as breezy as his stride. When Duke's mother, Daisy, and his father, J.E., enrolled him in a piano class, enrolled him in piano lessons, Duke didn't want to go. Baseball was Duke's idea of fun, but his parents had other notions for their child. Duke had to start with the piano basics, his fingers playing the same tired tune. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Daisy and J.E. made Duke practice day after day. To Duke, 1 and 2 wasn't music. He called it an umpy dump sound that was headed nowhere worth following. He quit his lessons and kissed the piano a fast goodbye. I probably would have done the same thing. Years later, on a steamy summer night, Duke heard that Umpy Dump played in a whole new way. Folks called the music ragtime, piano that turned Umpy Dump into a soul-rousing romp. The ragtime music set Duke's fingers to wiggling. Soon he was back at the piano trying to plunk out his own ragtime rhythm. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. At first, this was the only crude tinkling Duke knew. You notice the music's just swirling around. He's just really thinking about how he can make it sound better. But with practice, all Duke's fingers rode the piano keys. Duke started to play his own made-up melodies, whole notes, chords, sharps and flats, left-handed hops and right-handed slides. Believe it, man, Duke taught himself to press on the purlies like nobody else could. His one and two umpy dump became a thing of the past. Now playing the piano was Duke's all-time love. So this statement right here, believe it, man. Whose voice is that? Hmm. Who's speaking right there? They're speaking to us. They're saying, believe it, man. But who was that? When Duke was 19, he was entertaining ladies and gents at parties, pool halls, country clubs, and cabarets. He had fine as pie good looks and flashy threads. He was a ladies' man with flair to spare, and whenever a pretty-skinned beauty leaned on Duke's piano, he played his best music, composition smoother than a hairdo sleeked with pomade. Which details in the text and the illustration help you understand who Duke is and how the biographer might feel about him? Think about that. It wasn't long before Duke formed his own small band, a group of musicians who played all over Washington, D.C. But soon they split the D.C. Scene and made tracks for New York City, for Harlem, the place where jazz music ruled. They called themselves the Washingtonians and performed in all kinds of New York City honky tonks. Barron's Exclusive, the Plantation, Ciro's, and the Kentucky Club. Folks got to know the band by name and came to hear them play. Then, on an autumn day in 1927, Lady Luck smiled pretty on the Washingtonians. They were asked to play at the Cotton Club, Harlem's swankiest hangout, a big time night spot. The Cotton Club became a regular gig for Duke and his band. They grew to 12 musicians and changed their name to Duke Ellington and his orchestra. Night after night, they played their music, which was broadcast live over the radio. Now, that's a huge accomplishment, isn't it? For all those homebodies out in radio lovers, out in radio lovers land, folks who only dreamed of sitting pretty um, at the Cotton, the show helped them feel like they were out on the town. Duke's Creole love call was spicier than a pot of jambalaya. His mood indigo was a musical stream that swelled over the airwaves. Notice the language the author used here to describe what it was like to listen to Duke's music. What does that tell you about his music? And in what ways do you think the radio contributed to Duke Ellington's success? Because here it says that his song Creole Love Call was spicier than a pot of jambalaya. And then it said that his Mood Indigo song was a musical stream that swelled over the airways. And you can see the illustrator here did a fantastic job of kind of connecting the text to the illustration here. You can just see the people that are just so mesmerized by the music. It's pretty awesome. Sometimes the orchestra performed their tunes straight up, but other nights when the joint started to jump, Duke told his band to play whatever came to mind, to improvise their solos, to make the music fly. And they did. Each instrument raised its own voice. One by one, each cat took the floor and wiped it clean with his own special way of playing. Sonny Greer pounded out the bang of jump rope feet on the street with his snare drum. A subway beat on his bass drum. Um, a sassy ride on his cymbal. Sonny's percussion was smooth and steady. Sometimes only his drumsticks made the music, cracking out the rattly beat of wood slapping wood. Along with Sonny, Joe, Tricky Sam, uh, Nanton went to work on his trombone, sliding smooth melodic gold. He stretched the notes to their full tilt, pushing and pulling their tropical lilt. When Tricky Sam was through, he'd nod to Otto, Toby Hardwick. Your turn, he'd say. Take the floor, Daddy-O. Sounds like they had such a fun time, didn't they? It's awesome. Toby let loose on his sleek brass sax, curling his notes like a kite tail in the wind. A musical loop-de-loop with a serious twist. So, on this page, I can almost hear the music. Can you? So, how did the author and illustrator bring music to life in this photo? I can see one right here because the author stated that it was like a loop-de-loop, right? What do you see in the string of the kite here? Exactly. Me too. And then look at the music just flowing straight out and the wind and maybe music kind of making this man's hat fly away. So last came James Bubber Miley, one of a kind horn player. He could make his trumpet wail like a man whose blues were deeper than the deep blue sea. To stir up the sound of his low moan horn, Bubber turned out a growl from way down in his throat. His gut bucket tunes put a spell on the room. So let's talk about the mood created by this trumpeter here. How would you describe it? What mood did this trumpeter kind of let out with his music? Yeah, those solos were kicking. Hot buttered bop with lots of sassy cool tones. When the band did their thing, the Cotton Club performers danced the Black Bottom, the Fishtail, and the Susie Q. And while they were cutting the rug, Duke slid his honey-colored fingertips across the ivory 88s. There he is. The word on Duke and his band spread from New York to Macon to Kalamazoo, or Macon, I think that's what that says, and on to the sunshiny Hollywood Hills. The whole country soon swung to Duke's beat. Once folks got a taste of Duke's soul sweet music, they hurried to the record stores asking, "Yo, you got the Duke? Slide me some King of the Keys, please. Gonna play me that Piano Prince and his band." People bought Duke's records, thousands of them. In 1939, Duke hired Billy Strayhorn, a musician who wrote songs. Billy became Duke's ace, his main man. Duke and Billy worked as a team. Together they composed unforgettable music. Billy's song, Take the A Train, was one of the greatest hits of 1941. Wow, look at that photo. It's awesome. With the tunes that he and Billy wrote, Duke painted colors with his band's sound. He could whirl the butterscotch tones of Tricky Sam's horn with the silver notes of the alto saxophones. And oh, those clarinets! Duke could blend their red-hot blips into a purple dash of brass from the trumpet section. In time, folks said Duke Ellington's real instrument wasn't his piano at all. It was his orchestra. Most people called his music jazz, but Duke Ellington called it the music of the people. And to celebrate the history of African American people, Duke composed a special suite he called Black, Brown, and Beige, a suite that rocked the bosom and lifted the soul. Black, Brown, and Beige sang the glories of dark skin, the pride of African heritage, and the triumphs of Black people from the days of slavery to years of civil rights struggle. Duke introduced Black, Brown, and Beige at the New York Carnegie Hall, or New York's Carnegie Hall, a symphony hall so grand that even the seats wore velvet. Few African Americans had played at Carnegie Hall before. Duke and his orchestra performed on January 23, 1943. Outside, the winter wind was cold and slapping. But inside, Carnegie Hall was sizzling with applause. Duke had become a master maestro. Because of Duke's genius, his orchestra now had a musical mix like no other. Now you've heard of the jazz playing man, the man with the cats who would swing with his band, king of the keys, piano piano prince, Edward Kennedy Ellington, the Duke. So I want you to think about the significance of this. Duke Ellington believed that jazz is the music of his people. What do you think he meant by that? That his jazz was the music of his people. All right, guys. Well, that was Duke Ellington. Thank you so much for joining in to listen. We will have a new book tomorrow. Thanks, you guys. See you next time.